Dear viewers, I am Zainab Surfraz Ahmed, a student of Geopolitics and Semitic Languages based in Karachi, Pakistan. In this episode, we will be trying to shed some light on the recent structural changes in the Supreme Court of Pakistan. But before proceeding further, I should make mention of the celebrations of the Platinum Jubilee of the Indian Constitution in 2024 till 2025 that marks 75 years since its adoption on November 26, 1949. Here are some excerpts from the Granville Austin lecture delivered by India's senior Supreme Court lawyer Dr. Abhishek Manu Sunghvi recently. Granville Austin was the author of two seminal political histories of the Constitution of India. The Indian Constitution, cornerstone of a nation and working a democratic constitution, the Indian experience. Dear viewers, identifying 5 critical features of India's Supreme Court, Dr. Singhvi in his talk stated, among other things, that even a constitutional amendment can be unconstitutional. Interestingly, Dr. Singhvi's argument seems to militate against the thinking behind the recent structural changes in the Supreme Court of Pakistan, constituting, so to speak, a sardonic comment. Let's listen into Dr. Singhvi without much ado.
The basic structure, which I refer to as the pride of India and the envy of the world. What a remarkable concept in one sentence. Even a constitutional amendment can be unconstitutional. Again, a creation of dynamic constitutional Supreme Court jurisprudence. PIL, with a lot of problems. A very unruly horse requiring a dexterous rider, and frequently the judges who are supposed to be dexterous riders are becoming more and more scarce. But despite that, it's done a lot of good. It's reached and addressed nooks and crannies which were insulated from scrutiny. So this again is a very unique Indian invention. And also you must remember that this starts from the identity of the Indian Supreme Court as a dual court. Again, it's unique. Probably very few countries in the world with this volume and this creativity and these frontiers have a dual role as a nitty-gritty, bread-butter daily court and also as a constitutional court. There is no division in this, and therefore, and each is important. People now say that you should hive off, you should differentiate. I have generally opposed it because it will weaken the integrity of the Supreme Court. And the nitty-gritty daily bread and butter, sometimes very puerile issues which it decides, are still necessary because they reflect a remarkable vote of confidence by the ordinary person in the Supreme Court. He somehow doesn't feel as bad when he loses in the Supreme Court after having lost everywhere else. And to take away that access to make it an abstract constitutional court or to intermediate a court of appeal as the final court in between may be an issue requiring a far greater discussion.
All of us know that the Supreme Court of Pakistan has been undergoing structural changes due to legislation which critics argue that bifurcated it into regular and constitutional benches. This is the result of the Supreme Court Practice and Procedure Act 2023, which was upheld by the court and later amendments like the 27th Amendment. While the legislation aimed to decentralize the Chief Justice master of the roster power, some judges and lawyers believe it has fractured the court structure and compromised judicial independence. With the formation of a new Federal Constitution Court (FCC) by the 27th Amendment further complicating matters. Bifurcation of the Supreme Court. Original jurisdiction. The Supreme Court's original jurisdiction under Article 184 was split between a regular bench and a constitutional bench as a part of the Practice and Procedure Act. The 27th Amendment created Federal Constitutional Court (FCC) and abolished the Supreme Court Constitution jurisdiction, relegating it to a subordinate court, handling routine civil and criminal matters. Composition. The FCC Chief Justice and initial judges are to be appointed by the President on the Prime Minister's advice, raising concern about the judicial independence and the executive influence. Impact on the bifurcation. Judicial independence. The changes have been criticized for undermining judicial independence by giving the executive more control over the judicial appointments and decision-making. Fractured court. The Supreme Court is perceived as fractured, with judges having different views on the new rules and the implication of the amendments. Rule of law. Critics argue the amendments, especially the 27th Amendment, have tipped the balance of power away from the judiciary and towards the executive, with implication for the rule of law. Loss of power. The 27th Amendment is said to have stripped the Supreme Court of its power to hear constitutional cases and set precedent, leaving these matters to the newly created FCC, which is said to be not bound by previous Supreme Court precedents. Be that as it may, let's listen into Dr. Sunghvi again to find out how he looks at his country's apex court and its journey.
Let us now turn to some features of the Supreme Court as a bastion of all this, as a central theme in this journey of 75 years plus. Obviously, the constitutional text, already very vibrant, the product of 3 years of very engaging debate. And if you read the debates, by the way, there are completely contradictory views on the same page, on the same section. So out of the dialectics of thesis, antithesis, they somehow get synthesis at the end. And that's again no mean achievement. So this constitutional text, already imbued with the reflections and deliberations of the Assembly, was exponentially enlarged with constitutional context by the Supreme Court in the last 75 plus years, by multiple and ever dynamic layers of jurisprudence. 3 features alone, for example, judicial review, I always say, would make Marbury and Madison blush. The judicial review which we have today, which you study in your universities, would make Dyson theorists cringe. This is some different creature, a different species. It's all a development of jurisprudence by the court. And finally, you have now, coming up to speed, the current Supreme Court through several changing Chief Justices. A more liberal institution, dynamic and forward-looking, looking at frontier issues like privacy, technology, gender issues, not always getting it right. I'm only commenting about the subject and the phase. I'm not saying got it right. They got it wrong a lot of times. But those are the broad 6 phases of the Supreme Court. However, this is my oversimplified attempt to put it within the capsule. The inconsistencies within each phase are marked. They don't do any good to the Supreme Court. When we started practice, we used to joke that there are 4 or 5 Supreme Courts functioning in that building. Now we are worried that we are somewhere around 15 to 16 Supreme Courts functioning in that building. And that's not good. That's not good for the power, the strength and the integrity of the institution.
Thank you for watching this video. Please do share, like and subscribe. Mania Zabud Zainab Sarfaz Ahmad, Karachi, Pakistan. Ana Zainab Sarfaz Ahmad, Karachi, Pakistan.